All right, listeners, ready to dive into something a little different with us today. This deep dive is all about how to play a board game.
Interesting.
Have you ever heard of Fairy Ring?
I have actually, yeah.
It's a whimsical, mushroom-themed board game
Yeah.
for 2 to 4 players.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to break down the rules so you can impress your friends with your Fairy Ring mastery.
Oh, sounds good.
Picture a moonlit forest clearing.
Okay.
Fairies are waking up, and mushrooms are popping up everywhere.
Uh-huh.
The goal is to collect the most magical energy.
Right.
It's called mana.
Okay.
And score the most points before winter comes.
Oh.
So each player is trying to create the most successful mushroom village.
Right, that's the basic idea.
Okay, so before we get to like the mystical mushroom part,
Sure.
what do we need to actually play this game?
Well, each player gets a village board, and this is where they'll be planting their mushrooms.
Okay.
You also get a cute little fairy standee to represent you moving around the board. And then there's mana tokens, which you'll collect throughout the game.
Okay, cool. I think I also read about a score wheel.
Yes, and it's shaped like a flower, which is cute.
Yeah.
But it also has a strategic element too, because you keep your score hidden from other players.
Oh, sneaky. Okay.
Yeah.
So no trash talking your opponent's score.
Right.
Got it. Okay, so we've got our villages.
Uh-huh.
Our fairies are ready.
Yeah.
How does the game actually work? Like, how do you play?
So Fairy Ring is played over 2 rounds, and each round has 6 turns.
Okay.
And every turn is broken down into 3 phases.
Right.
Place a mushroom, move your fairy, and gather mana.
You know, something that stood out to me when I was looking at the rules is that everyone chooses their actions at the same time.
Right.
That's pretty different from a lot of other board games.
Yeah, it is, and it adds a whole layer of strategy because you're having to try and anticipate what your opponents might do, but you're also trying to maximize your own opportunities at the same time.
Right.
So each player secretly chooses a mushroom card from their hand,
Okay.
places it face down, and no one knows what anyone else is going to do until they reveal their cards.
So it's a delicate dance of planning and reacting.
Exactly.
You might have this like brilliant mushroom strategy in your head, but then your opponent just throws a curveball. Yeah, what just happened?
Yeah, you have to be adaptable.
Okay.
So let's walk through each phase of a turn.
All right.
The first phase is place a mushroom. And you have 2 options here.
Okay.
You can either plant a new mushroom in your village or make an existing mushroom grow taller by adding a card of the same type on top of it.
So it's not just about collecting mushrooms. It's about like cultivating them strategically within your village.
Right.
I bet placement is key here.
Absolutely. There are rules about where you can and cannot place mushrooms on your board.
Okay.
And there's also a limit to how tall a mushroom can grow. You can't have mushrooms skyscrapers.
Makes sense. You don't want these magical mushrooms to take over the whole forest. All right, so we've planted our mushroom, or we've grown our mushroom.
Yep.
Now what? Our fairies are ready for action.
Right. That's where phase 2 comes in. Move your fairy.
Okay.
So all of the village boards are arranged in a circle, like a real fairy ring.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
So the mushrooms themselves create the path that the fairies travel along.
Yeah, it's pretty clever. And your fairy moves clockwise around this ring, visiting all the mushroom villages.
Right.
The number of spaces your fairy moves is determined by the movement value on the mushroom card you played that turn.
So you're not just choosing a mushroom for what it does, you're also choosing it for how far it lets your fairy travel.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this is where things can get a little tricky because even though a mushroom might be made up of multiple cards stacked on top of each other, it still only counts as 1 space for movement.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right, so our fairies are flitting about the ring. They're visiting all these other mushroom villages. What happens when they land? That's got to be where the mana comes in, right?
You got it. Phase 3 is gathering mana. And this is like the lifeblood of your mushroom village.
Okay.
This is where those different types of mushrooms we talked about really come into play.
All right, so lay it on me. What kind of magical mushrooms are we dealing with here?
Well, we can start with the spring mushroom.
Okay.
It's a little bit of a trickster.
Okay.
You gain mana when your fairy passes over it,
Interesting.
but not when you actually land on it.
Oh, so you have to be kind of strategic about how you move your fairy around to maximize your mana gain from spring mushrooms.
Exactly.
Right.
Then we have the luminaria mushroom, which is all about light and attracting fireflies.
Okay.
The more fireflies you have visible in your village, the more mana this mushroom produces.
It's not even just about the mushrooms themselves. It's about creating a whole environment
Yeah.
that's appealing to these magical fireflies.
Yeah, okay. Now, the pollinaria mushroom thrives on abundance.
Okay.
So the more mushrooms you have in your village, the more mana this one generates.
So you're kind of building a whole diverse mushroom ecosystem where everything works together.
Right.
All right. What other fantastical fungi do we have?
We also have the magidrome mushroom, which is probably the most straightforward of the bunch.
Okay.
It just has a set mana value printed right on the card.
All right. So that one's like the workhorse of the mushroom world.
Yeah.
Always there to provide a steady supply of mana.
Exactly. Then we have the lookout mushroom, which is all about reaching for the sky. The lookout mushroom gets taller and more powerful as you stack more cards of the same type on top of them.
Okay, I love that visual.
Yeah.
These mushrooms reaching up to the heavens, soaking up all that magical energy. Yeah.
And then last but not least, we have the academy mushroom.
Okay.
This one rewards you for moving your fairy strategically.
Wow.
So the more spaces your fairy moves in a turn, the more mana this mushroom will produce.
Wow, there is so much variety.
Yeah.
It really seems like each type of mushroom offers a completely different strategic path.
Right.
Like, you have to be a master mushroom farmer, just carefully cultivating your village to maximize your mana gain.
That's a great way to put it.
Now, when your fairy lands on one of your mushrooms during the gather mana phase, you collect mana based on its type and size.
Uh-huh.
But there's a twist, right?
Yes. If your fairy lands on an opponent's mushroom, they get to collect the mana, not you.
What?
Yeah.
So you can actually benefit from your opponent's actions.
You can.
That is so interesting.
But don't worry, there's still a chance for you to get some mana, even if your fairy lands on an opponent's mushroom.
Okay.
If you have a matching mushroom in your own village, you can collect mana too.
So it's a constant back and forth,
Yeah.
trying to outmaneuver your opponents, but also capitalizing on their moves whenever possible.
Exactly.
This game is sounding more and more fascinating with every detail you reveal.
It is a really cool game, and that's just the mana gathering part.
Right.
We haven't even talked about scoring or those intriguing objective cards yet.
All right, you've piqued our listeners' curiosity. Let's talk about how all of this mana translates into points. How do you actually win this mushroom showdown?
Well, the main way to score points is by gathering mana.
Okay.
As soon as you gather at least 20 mana, you gain 1 point, and you mark that secretly on your flower-shaped score wheel.
Okay.
But there is another way to score, which we'll dive into in just a minute.
Ooh, cliffhanger. Our listener will have to wait to find out what other scoring secrets lie hidden in this forest.
But I want you to think about this while you're waiting. If you were building a mushroom village, what kind of strategy would you choose?
Yeah.
Which mushrooms would you cultivate to create like the most successful and magical village in the forest?
All right. We are back in the magical mushroom forest. We've gathered mana, we've moved our fairies around the ring, and now it's time to uncover the final layer of strategy in Fairy Ring, those mysterious objective cards.
They really do add a whole other dimension to the game. You know, instead of just focusing on that mana collection, the objective cards give you bonus points for achieving certain conditions in your mushroom village.
Oh, so it's like you have these secret missions you're trying to complete alongside your main goal of gathering mana.
Exactly.
What kind of objectives might we encounter?
Well, one objective might challenge you to have a certain number of visible fireflies in your village by the end of the game. Remember those luminarium mushrooms we talked about, the ones that generate mana based on visible fireflies? Well, this objective encourages you to cultivate those glowing beauties even more strategically.
So you're not just thinking about the mana, you're also thinking about like creating a luminous landscape that attracts those magical creatures.
Right. It adds a nice visual element to the game as well.
Yeah, it does.
Another objective might focus on having a specific number of mushrooms of a certain type. Maybe it's all about those towering lookouts or the abundant pollinariums. Suddenly you're not just a mana farmer, you're like a specialized mushroom cultivator, carefully tending to your fungal garden to meet the demands of the objective.
I can see how these objectives would force you to make some tough choices.
Yeah.
Do you go all in on one type of mushroom to fulfill an objective, or do you try to maintain a diverse village to maximize your mana gain?
It's a real balancing act.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And some objectives are even more complex, requiring you to achieve a combination of conditions.
Oh, wow.
Maybe a certain number of mushrooms of one type and a certain number of fireflies. It really can be tricky.
So it sounds like you have to be adaptable, constantly reevaluating your strategy as the game progresses and new objectives are revealed.
Exactly.
So how do these objectives actually come into play during the game?
So at the beginning of the game, a certain number of objective cards are revealed depending on the number of players.
Okay.
Each player chooses one of the revealed objectives to keep secret. And this is your own personal goal for the game.
Ah, so it's like you have your public mana goal.
Right.
And then this secret objective you're working towards behind the scenes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you manage to fulfill your objective by the end of the game, you get those bonus points.
Cool.
And that can really be the difference between victory and defeat.
Okay, so we've covered mana gathering, mushroom types, fairy movement, and now these strategic objective cards. I'm starting to get a real feel for how all of these elements kind of work together to create such a rich and engaging game.
Yeah, me too.
But there's one last thing we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah.
How does the game actually end?
So at the end of the second round, after all players have taken their 6 turns, it's time for the grand reveal.
Okay.
Everyone reveals their secret score from their flower-shaped score wheel, and the player with the highest score wins.
So all that secret scorekeeping just adds an element of surprise at the very end.
It does. You might think you're in the lead,
Right.
but someone else could be quietly racking up points with their secret objective.
That's right. In the case of a tie, what happens then?
In case of a tie, the player with the most leftover mana wins.
Oh, cool. So it's a little bonus for efficient mana management
Exactly.
throughout the game. This has been such a fascinating deep dive.
I agree.
We've explored the whimsical world of Fairy Ring, from planting magical mushrooms to moving fairies around the ring, and uncovered the strategic depth that lies beneath its charming exterior.
Yeah, it's really cool.
We've learned about all those different mushroom types, each with its own unique way of producing mana, and we've delved into the strategic challenges of fulfilling those secret objectives. But maybe the most delightful aspect of Fairy Ring is the constant sense of discovery and adaptation.
Yeah.
The simultaneous action selection keeps you guessing what your opponents will do, and those hidden scores just add an element of suspense that lasts until the very end.
It's a great game.
It's a game that rewards both careful planning and the ability to think on your feet, and it's all wrapped up in this charming, whimsical theme that makes it such a joy to play. So if you're looking for a board game that's strategic and engaging and visually stunning, Fairy Ring is definitely worth checking out. You might just discover your inner mushroom farmer and create the most magical village in the forest. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Fairy Ring. We'll see you next time for another adventure in knowledge.